You're listening to Primordial Harmony. This is a special interlude episode featuring Ignacio. What's the story behind his disappearance? Mid-morning of Kythron the 21st. Ignacio's invisibility wears off, but now you're a good mile away from your companions. Lysandra Calderos's words echo in your mind. Vanifer has fallen, a third of our numbers destroyed. Go to northwestern edge of Northall Woods. You skirt the west side of the forest, and as the tree line curves eastward, you see a small pillar of smoke. As you draw near, it's clear that it's a small campfire, a robed figure sitting on what looks to be a rolled-up carpet. The figure looks up to you. Ignacio, Lizzie says in a sultry tone, her wavy blonde locks spilling out from the robe's hood. She stands and throws the hood back, her hair spilling everywhere, and walks right up to you. She wraps her arms behind your neck and kisses you. It's disgustingly passionate. It's almost as if your skin ignites at her touch. She pulls back her hands on the back of your neck, her elbows bent, with her body still pressed against yours. She looks at you with a manic smile.
Well, you're in good spirits, considering the message.
Vanifer is dead! Imix has seen her for what she is. Finally! No more nonsense with bleeding her infernal ties into our order. Those excavators did half of my work for me, she says, as the DM continues the music.
I did tell you that they were useful.
Quite right. There's no one standing in our way, Ignacio. But there are a few items we must take care of. We have an appointment with a soon-to-be, or rather, with a powerful soon-to-be ally. She says that with a slight wink. You'll be accompanying me?
Yes, well, it would appear that nobody will be coming looking for me, as I imagine you have a hand in what's going on down there. He points towards.
He points toward Forstride?
Yeah.
She chuckles. She says, "Oh, it is the machinations of the champion. It serves us, keeps their attention off of us for a while. But good that you'll be accompanying me." She walks back to the campfire. She picks up the rolled-up carpet and tosses it to a space between you and her, and she says, "Unfurl!" And you see the carpet do just that, and float above the ground. She gracefully sits down upon it, and swings her legs onto the fabric. She smiles at you, and pats the spot beside her. "Come now, join me."
We'll be traveling in style. I like it. He takes the seat right next to her.
Oh, darn. Now, Rug, to where I took you a few eves ago, as the crow flies. The carpet lifts off of the ground and begins to fly west by northwest. It slowly but surely ascends and accelerates and soon the landscape is flowing beneath you at the speed of a horse's gallop. You lift higher and higher off of the ground, the rolling hills below you, and you can see to your left the last bits of the outlying farms of Forstride. And then, as the carpet continues to fly, you see the northwestern tip of Conadir Forest blanketed in smoke.
Is that your work?
She waves dismissively. Thermander's forest plan seems to have come to fruition despite his death. The trees ought to be burning with hate now. Roll a perception check. You can just barely make out the glow of where the currently burning forest is, underneath the blanket of smoke. And the carpet continues to fly.
Can I see where that would be? Is it just along the forest edge, or?
It's so let me get a little bit of a So you are flying. Yeah. So you are about here. And Ignacio, repeat your question again?
Does it look like it's coming from a specific spot, or is it just all amongst the...
It looks like there are just a couple of different hotspots. It doesn't seem like it's radiating. It looks like they're just... It looks like... from what you can tell, you can't see, like, one particular source point. It looks like there's several different burning areas. Different spots. The carpet continues to proceed, and you see the silt shroud beneath you, sort of the way it winds around hills. And soon the sun moves down to set. The day wanes into evening, and soon you find yourself reaching the threshold between the grasslands and the mountainous area. As the evening darkens, Lizzie scoots toward Ignacio, and she nudges herself against him. She looks up at him with inviting eyes. Well, don't you want to see what it's like? She winks. Up here?
He'll wrap an arm around her and pull her in.
The carpet flies through the night. It seems to know where to go without Lizzie guiding it. When you awaken from that evening, you feel groggy. Then you notice that the air is acrid, smelling of brimstone. Looking over the edge of the carpet, you see craggy, rocky mountains. The air is noticeably thinner as you begin to awaken. Ignacio is quite high up. Ignacio, Lizzie says as she places her hand over his shoulder, caressing him. We're almost there.
Where's there?
Is the home of our potential ally, Halanaxis. Halanaxis is a proud and greedy warrior. His command of fire dwarfs ours. He bathes it, breathes it. Speaking of dwarves, that's how we'll convince him to join us. You see, Ignacio, Halanaxis owns much wealth by right of conquest. His home is on the periphery of a dwarven kingdom to the north of these mountains. They love to raid his home. He can normally drive them away, but I can tell he's nearing his wit's end. She smirks. He's far too prideful to just move. We'll be presenting him with an opportunity. Small hiccup is transporting his wealth. We're going to need something special for that, but my scouts have pointed out a lead. We're going now to meet him now, because in order to follow that lead, we will require the assistance of Halanaxis. It's a risk, Ignacio, but the life we lead is nothing but risk. Besides, if not today, I'm certain those dwarves would send a team specifically to slay Halanaxis. We're saving his life. And then she sort of leans forward. Don't say that to him, though.
Of course, pride and all that.
Now you're getting it. The carpet lowers to a small plateau. Lizzie steps off, gesturing Ignacio to follow.
He does so.
Furl, she says, and the carpet rolls up into its little cylinder. She waves Ignacio toward her, and then says, follow. And you realize for a moment, or after a moment of maybe indignation, you realize that it's a command for the carpet, which floats just an inch off the ground and follows a few feet behind her. You walk over a few peaks and valleys, and just after the height of the day, you make it to a narrow ridge, where you can see a dark cave plunging into the mountainside. Lizzie walks out onto the flat ground, which is about 10 feet wide, 30 feet long along the mouth of the cave. She gestures for you to join her on this somewhat precarious space.
He walks out, trying to remain cautious of the surroundings of this unfamiliar place.
Halanaxis, it is I, Lysandra Calderos. I'm here for our agreed appointment. Silence. Then a jet of fire billows out sharply over your head. Its heat bristling over your body. You hear footfalls. A huge creature that reverberates the rock as it steps. 2 pairs of footsteps? 2 creatures? 4 legs? Out of the darkness, a pair of orange eyes that glow like embers appear, followed by a massive, red-scaled reptilian head. Lysandra Calderos, you returned. And I see you've brought a tribute. His eyes center on Ignacio. No, great Halanaxis. This is Ignacio, my esteemed colleague. He is a member of our order. He regards you coldly, oddly enough. I see. I will admit you are extraordinarily brave returning here. I almost convinced myself that you'd have thought better of keeping this appointment, but humans are as foolish as dwarves are stubborn. You see that Lizzie just sort of nods in quiet, either submission or agreement. I will hear out what you have to say. Yes, well, we invite you to join our Order of the Eternal Flame. And we ask you, or we are prepared to offer you a new lair. You can see the creature steps forward a bit more, and you can see his long neck that leads down to a massive framed body. And you spot, just covered slightly by the darkness, a pair of wings. The dragon raises his eyebrow, says, "But I have this lair here."
'Tis a fine layer, but I'm sure those pesky dwarves are bothersome.
His expression turns sour, his brow furrows, and he grunts, a little bit of fire coming out of his nostrils. Quite.
Wouldn't you much rather be surrounded by adoring cultists of the flame?
He stops for a moment and thinks. He looks to Lizzie and he says, "You didn't mention adoring servants." "Oh, of course. They serve they serve the flame, and by extension, you." And she looks at Ignacio, and a look of good going on her face. And Helenaxis says, "Do you have a means to transport my wealth?" Lizzie says, "We are working on that. In fact, we require a little bit of your great power to assist us in such a task." "Oh?" And he looks around, and he looks at the ridge, and then he looks at the small, narrow pathway that leads up to it. And he says, "Surely you can bring some packmen to carry." Lizzie looks a little panicked. She says, "That would take... unfortunately, we have many tasks we must do, and soon."
Helenaxis, if I might. I'm sure what do you prefer, dragon, drake?
He says, "I am indeed a dragon," he says, with fire just kind of pouring out of his mouth.
Okay. I would believe that a dragon of your stature would not like to be away from his keepsakes for too long. Bringing men as pack mules would be take a long time to transport.
And if any of them thought to steal, I would...
But trust me, these men have no free will. They serve only the flame.
He sort of stares at you, holds your gaze.
I stare right back at him.
So what is... what did... wow, I totally forgot what Ignacio just said.
Trying to persuade him away from the idea of having cultists or whoever carry his treasure and lead him towards Lizzie's plan.
Okay. He he says, "And what exactly do you plan to do otherwise?" Lizzie pipes up and says, "There is an artificer on the eastern edge of the forest south of here. He can create wondrous things, among which is an item I'm sure you're familiar with." And the dragon ponders for a moment. "You mean you wish to transport my wealth in a bag that could spill into the astral plane at any moment?" And smoke billows from his nostrils, and he takes a step and it shakes the ground. Lizzie kind of fumbles a little bit on her words. No, it would be secure, of course. I wouldn't bring this up to you unless it were. He growls angrily. Lizzie looks to you pleadingly.
Great, Helenaxis. I assure you that the artificer's work is good. You will not lose anything. In fact, upon this journey to your new lair, which I might add has a wondrous lava spa. You will only surely obtain more.
Yes, quite right, says Lizzie. The nearby city. Once the plans of our icon of strength, she says, choosing her words very carefully, are put into motion, you'll have your picking of the wealth there. Halanaxis raises an eyebrow and he brings a clawed finger to his chin and scratches. He looks very intrigued by the idea of amassing more wealth. And he stands there, consideringly, for several moments. Unless you were to break the silence.
Also, there are no dwarves in our region.
His eyes snap to you. And will there be any creatures that wish to annoy me every other 10 day with their foolish quests?
Well, to be fair, the only creatures that would annoy you have already been taken care of. They will not venture to that layer. You set up a sort of a distraction. Unfortunately, some of our numbers did fall, but we remain pretty strong.
Ah, calling of the weak, I see.
Well, some flames don't burn bright enough for me. He says that he'll just like some fire licks around his hands. Almost like mocking the dragon.
Ooh. Halanaxis smiles a toothy grin. And you can see that each tooth is about the size of a dagger. And he says, I feel we may have an agreement brewing. Young Ignacio. He looks to Lizzie. He says, I will go with you to get this device you speak of. But I will only allow myself away from my lair for a day at most. Oh, that's not a problem. With your speed in the air, you can reach the Artificer in under a few hours. Good. I assume you have your own mode of transport? And she nods gingerly.
Oh, hang on now. I would be a fool to pass up a chance to fly on a dragon.
He claws the ground and stares at you. And he lifts his head back, and fire starts to fill his mouth, and then levels his head towards you. But instead of breathing on you, he says, You would dare suppose yourself to ride upon me?
I would only grovel graciously at the chance to exterminate my Dragon Lord's foes. You see, I am what they call a pyromancer. I feel like we have a kinship. You are much greater than I, for I am just a lowly human.
Pray tell, young Ignacio, what does that have to do with treating me as a mount?
Well, you see. Now, hear me out. If we get there faster, we can return faster, and since you have a problem with dwarves trying to pillage your hoard, we would not be gone for long. The carpet is fast, but it still took us all night to get here.
And Lizzie says, and you would hate to have to wait for us in the middle of some podunk town that, of course, couldn't stand up to you, but I am aware that most esteemed dragons find it irritating to be around normal mortals for longer than absolutely necessary. Go ahead and roll a persuasion check with advantage. Oof. He says, it's true. I know that I have more distance. Or sorry, he says, I know that I can I am faster than any paltry wizard's firebolt. He kind of glares at Ignacio, and he says, you will need to offer me a bit more for me to agree to that. I do not submit to being the carrier of individuals such as yourselves lightly.
Well, what if I told you that I know the ins and outs of the greatest heroes in the region? The only ones that could even attempt to muster to challenge you.
This gives him pause as his angry glare turns into...
I know where they live, I know where their families are, I know where all their loved ones are, and I know how they will react. I know where their places of power are.
It's always good to have a little insurance. I rarely waste my time with simple... Mike thinks for a second. I rarely waste my time with petty familial deaths. That's a good way to spur annoyances with, these mortals wanting revenge. It's a good way to ruin an afternoon, but having that insurance would be useful. He walks a little bit further out, and he gets his head close to you and Lizzie and says, I agree. And he lays his head down on the stone. Be quick.
I'll extend a hand out and after you.
Lizzie...
Can I open her up?
Right. Lizzie looks like she's beaming as she looks at you. And she as gently as she can, she takes your hand and steps onto the neck of this dragon. And you do too, I take it?
Yeah, I follow her.
She holds the carpet in her hands and she says, "Oh, Helenaxis, I wouldn't want to dirty you with my my dirty boots. I have something that, well, the carpet. We used it to fly, but you might appreciate it if I see what you're saying. Go ahead and do that." "Yes, of course." She lays the carpet down, gestures for you to scoot onto it.
I scoot onto it. You know, I could just clean her boots.
She looks at you and she puts up a hand like, "Just watch." And she leans down and she whispers something to the carpet that you can't even really hear. It's inaudible to you. And then she looks at you and she whispers, "Hold on to the carpet."
He does so.
And Halanaxis jumps into the air. And it's everything you can do to not fall as he beats his wings and the wind rushes by you. And Halanaxis moves off. Hope you enjoyed this, Joy.
Yeah, Joy. Hi, Joy. Bye, Joy.
There you go. Let's see here. So it's the afternoon, or probably mid-morning of Kythron 22. Halanaxis takes off with Ignacio and Lizzie hanging on to his back spines. The speed that this dragon flies at is more than that of the flying carpet. Ignacio sees the ground race underneath him, and he watches the terrain start to get lighter and then darker as night creeps on them. He notices a couple of times, well, he doesn't notice, this is a pretty big sensory event where the air around him and Lizzie gets extremely hot, and he looks to his sides and he notices that Halanaxis's wings, they've grown red hot, and heat lines are waving off of them, and the heat of the air is mixing with the air surrounding. And he takes a big, he sort of stops in air, revs up his wings. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but he prepares his wings for one big flap, and the acceleration threatens to throw Ignacio and Lizzie off as he rockets forward in the air. And this happens a couple of times on their trip. But nonetheless, the night begins to creep in, the sun sets, and it grows dark as they fly over Conadir Forest. And he can see, as he looks down on Conadir Forest, there are embers and fire. Within the foliage of the forest, there's smoke. Do you see it, Zachariel? Says Lizzie.
That's quite a sight. I imagine this is your work.
Well, it is actually Thermander's idea. One of his last useful things before he was eliminated. Those fires are going to be quite a challenge to put out. She smiles knowingly.
You think so?
It'd be pretty hard to put out a fire when the very ground contains embers that never die.
I see.
Soon, you fly over this part of the forest, and you see below a small, sleepy town, as Lizzie says, "Good Halanaxis, this is where we will get the tool we need to move your impressive horde." You hear a rumble as Halanaxis grunts, and he says, "Make it quick," as he descends, and he softly lands in the middle of this small, sleepy town as Lizzie directs him to a tower that is made of some sort of stone. He lands, and Looking around, doesn't look like anyone has really noticed this. Seems like everyone around here is asleep as it is late into the evening. Lizzie gestures to Ignacio to hop off as she starts sliding down the side of Alenaxis and lands on her feet.
He will do the same.
Ignacio, how much do you know about the gnome man that lives here? She says, gesturing to the tower ahead of him.
Gnome, you say?
Yes. His name...
Met a few gnomes.
His name is Londok Bulwarker. He is a powerful artificer and has a small fortune of magical items that he has collected. We're going to request a few things from him. Alenaxis grunts. How long exactly will that take? Oh, not long. People in this sleepy town shan't bother you. They'll treat this experience like a bad dream, I think. She walks up to the door of the tower, and you watch as she makes a few arcane gestures. And you find if you stand close enough, the sound is gone completely. She nods. She backs up away, and you see her chant another arcane incantation as you see the door shudder a little bit. Ah, good. And she walks forward and opens the door and steps inside, beckoning you.
He's right behind her.
You
And he says, even though he's in the silence, he's just a clever girl.
You enter what looks like a small sitting room with a dining table, chairs, more like a coffee table, a stove off to the side, and some stairs that lead to the next level of the tower. She begins walking up these stairs. On the next floor, which you do hear your footsteps as you're no longer in this area of silence. As you enter the next room, you see what looks like a sleeping space with a nice gnome-sized bed underneath a window with dim moonlight diffusing in. And you see, curled up under the blanket of this bed, is a small gnome man. Londok, says Lizzie as she makes a gesture, and you hear what sounds like a clap. I might have popped the mic doing that. It sounds like a clap, and Londok starts awake. He looks over. What are you? Who are you? Get out of my house!
That's no way to treat your guests.
What? Guests? How did you get in here? And then he kind of takes another look at you. And his hands start to glow a little bit. And Lizzie says, "We're here for something I know you have. Being an accomplished adventurer, you must have a..." She makes a nonchalant sort of expression. She takes her finger and sort of points it away from her face as she bends her elbow, so her hand is like near her cheek. She says, "You must have a portable hole or a bag of holding, surely. Why in the blazes would I give it to you?" And Lizzie looks to Ignacio.
Look, sir, I'm sure you want to get back to your sleep and dismiss this all as a dream. The quicker you do that, the quicker we leave.
Roll a charisma check, whether or not it's intimidation or persuasion. I'll let you decide.
Well, as he's saying this, flame begins to wreath between his fingers, so it's definitely intimidation.
All right. He snorts. He says, "You think a little fire will intimidate me?" You then watch as, or he says, I need to correct his voice. He says, "You think a little fire can intimidate me?" And you watch as Lizzie points sort of at an angle, outside, and then she mumbles something. It's inaudible, but then afterward, through the window, you see the head and eye of Halanaxis. And Lizzie says, "Don't make this unfortunate for you." And then she makes a gesture, and he turns around, and he freezes.
Be a real shame for this whole town to disappear.
Right then, I'll produce what I have. Now, don't lie, Londok. And the gnome man steps off of his bed, and he starts walking across the room to the next set of stairs up. And he says, "I have a portable hole for you," he says, grumbling under his breath. And he starts walking up the stairs. And
I'm gonna follow him.
okay. You follow him, and he looks over his shoulder, obviously frightened. He's shaking a little bit, and he opens this locked door, this locked trap door that continues so that you can go up the stairs, and you can get into this big. Well, it's as big as the rest of the tower, but it's an open room with one side of it. There is what looks like a workbench, and then a bunch of things that are draped in tarp and canvas. He says, he walks over to one, and he lifts the tarp over it, and it looks like a small chest of drawers, like almost like a dresser. And he pulls a drawer open, and the sound of clattering. There's a few baubles in there that are bouncing around as he opens the drawer, and then he takes out this small wooden box, and he looks at Ignacio, and he has a very obviously but also sensibly resentful look on his face as he says, "Here we go. Show you down in front of your cohort," as he starts walking down the stairs. His hands still shake.
Hey, Londok.
He turns and looks at you.
What else do you have here?
He says, "A few baubles from my time, some reagents."
I suggest you don't mention anything else, unless the dragon take it.
He shudders, and he just nods and continues walking. Then he pauses, takes another look at you, questioningly, shakes his head, and continues down the stairs.
I follow.
He says, all right, here." He opens the box, and he pulls out what looks like a black piece of fabric. And he kind of squints a little bit, and he says, and he goes over to his bed, and he taps a small orb on the bedpost, and it lights up, and it illuminates a lot of the room. And you can see him a lot more clearly now. And he takes the black fabric, and he stretches it out and lays it on the floor. And he says, "Portable hole." And he reaches his hand inside and kind of wiggles his fingers, pulls it out. And then he grabs the edges of it and collapses it back into the weird fabric and puts it back in the box and offers it up to you since you seem to be closer.
Yeah, take it.
Are we done here? Lizzie looks at Ignacio. What do you think, Ignacio?
I believe we're done here. He doesn't seem to have anything else of worth. I'm surprised he even had this.
He doesn't speak.
A lowly, wretched gnome.
His hands quiver a little bit. He doesn't respond to that. And then Lizzie smiles at you, Ignacio, and says, "Good work. We're done here, gnome. I suggest you lock your door. And she begins walking down the stairs.
All right. As she turns to walk away, do I have an emblem or anything from Gordon?
Do you have an emblem or anything from Gordon? Oh fuck, I don't remember. DM speaking. I mean, if you did, it wouldn't be visible to him.
Yeah, but if I do, I'm leaving it.
Okay. Huh. I didn't think about it for this. I don't.
Breadcrumb, dude.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to remember if he probably. I think we actually talked about this, didn't we? And I think he did give you something. Yeah, and if not, I'll retcon it. Sure. You have a small like badge-like emblem from the way shields.
All right. Well, he's gonna shift his body and just kind of like stand in front of a table while looking at Londoc. And he'll reach into his robe and pull out this little emblem and slide, like just gently place it on the table, and back up and then turn around and leave.
Londoc stands blinking at what you just left, and Lizzie holds the door open for you, and when you exit, she shuts it, and then walks back over to Halenaxis, and she says, "My good Halenaxis, how about we show you your new lair, or shall we begin moving?" And he snorts a little bit of smoke. Quickly, show me what you have to offer, but make it fast. Of course. She looks to you, Ignacio. She begins climbing up on his back.
I begin climbing.
And Halenaxis jumps off the ground in a great leap and takes to the skies, leaving the small, sleepy town of Tomerer behind. A few hours later, the sun rises on Kythron the 23rd. Thanks, Justin.
No problem.
In this video, we will said bye to Joy twice, so bye, Joy, again.
Bye, Joy, again.